Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us at this next session of the A4Q Congress. I have with me Chris Rourke, and I'm delighted he's been able to attend. Chris is from an organisation called User Vision, and today he's going to talk about top tasks for better user experience. And I'm going to pass over to Chris now to start his presentation. Sit back and enjoy. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Thank you very much, Debbie, and good whatever time of day it is for you. It's morning here in the UK, in Scotland, where I'm speaking to you, because that's where myself and my company are based. And one of the things that we do is, where possible, doing this method that I'm going to be talking to you today called top tasks. And it's all about designing a better user experience. There's lots of methods we can use to design a better user experience. This is one that I find particularly gratifying and interesting. It has the great potential to sort of shake up the perspectives that people and organizations can have of their own content and their own functionality. And I personally find it very, very interesting to do. And I'm going to be talking through that. I'll just give you a brief introduction to, well, briefly about me, just to let you know who's talking to you for the next hour. I am a user experience consultant. I head up a company called User Vision, which I started about 21 years ago now, actually. And we're a user experience, user-centered design. That's what the UCD stands for. A consultancy doing things in user experience and service design, which is really the application of user experience across a wide range of touch points, and not just the interfaces, but the services themselves. That typically involves a lot of user research, experience design, so looking at what's the best way to arrange and design those touch points to resonate with the user needs, which have been well researched, and also quite a lot in accessibility and inclusive design. So that's actually making sure that whatever service or product you're creating can be used by people with any kinds of disabilities. And there's a whole set of guidance and regulations and laws about that as well. That's me in the digital worlds of touch points. That's actually a much younger and less hirsute version of me. Time has taken its toll, I'm afraid. But that's enough about me. You'll see the logo there for User Vision, but the other one is UXQB. And I noticed that there was another speaker earlier on in the conference who's also with a trainer with the UX Qualification Board. That's what that acronym stands for. And through ISKI, as the testing partner, we provide training and qualification, certification in user experience through the UX Qualification Board, and a whole series of training courses to do with that. But anyways, that's enough about me. What are we going to talk about today? There's a lot to be talked about in the world of top tasks as a subset to the world of user experience. And I'm just briefly going to be touching on it. I'll give you some references towards the end. Now, some of you that are tuning in might be familiar with top tasks. If so, if you've heard of top tasks, you've probably heard of the name Jerry McGovern, who I guess you could see as the, well, he is the founder of this method. He is a partner of User Vision. We've worked with him on various projects to help deliver top tasks projects to clients. And that's really where this was all initiated, is based on Jerry's work. And I'll be referencing some examples that he's given previously on this. But what we're going to talk about is, what are top tasks? Why is this method needed? When is it going to be effective, and why is that so effective? I'll talk briefly a little bit about some of the key steps in how it's actually performed. There's a lot more to be said about that. There's whole training courses on that, but I'll give you the key steps along the way. And then, how are the results applied? What does it mean? Is it how can we make sure it's going to have an actual impact on a website or other digital channel, typically, and how the results can be effective within an organization? So that's where we're going. We're going to start off on a place that for many people causes a bit of bit of anxiety, as you've probably guessed from my accent so far. From hearing me, I come from North America, come from the United States specifically, which gives me the dubious pleasure of having to deal with the Internal Revenue Service, which actually, regardless of where you're living and as a citizen, you have to do some kind of registration and dealings with. This was their website a few years ago. Now you can think of your own opinions of this, but I think there's a few interesting things there. There's quite a few smiling faces. I personally don't find myself smiling that much when I'm having to think about my taxes, but there are lots of smiling faces, lots of things that are asking you to do things, and not all that clear. Let's look at what's on there. We've got lots of different navigation options. There's stuff across the tops, everything from filing, payments, refunds, news, events, forms, and pubs. Well, pubs, not in the sense that I might think of them. Again, those smiling faces are very attractive. That's nice. But what about all these letters? It's a letter and acronym soup right there. Hot topics as opposed to cold topics, I suppose. What are their key changes? Your ITIN renewal. Talk about jargon being spoken to the end users, and tools, which personally I always wonder about the word tools when we're talking in a digital context, because it's not a physical thing like a hammer. But there's their set of tools, some nice acronyms to look at. There's a lot of things that could really disengage the user, and there's relatively few things that are actually speaking to what is the user likely to be doing. And this is where we're going to start talking about what is the key tasks. I think there's a lot of things on there that the organization is trying to say, hey, look at this. You should know about this. Look at this. Look at Pub 17. And as opposed to actually giving clear stepping stones that start off with what is the user's actual task. And that's really gets to the actual nature of this top tasks approach. You can get onto things like the news, this kind of thing with some more news, and goodness knows who wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to go check out the social media for the IRS. That's definitely what I want to see. So let's, I'm really glad that they have that on their homepage. So there's a lot of things that are on there that relatively few are actually clearly mapped on what I suspect would be the key tasks for the end users. The fact of the matter is that so many websites that are out there are created not really based on the end user's tasks, at least based on clear evidence of that, but it's based on some wishful thinking and very often inaccurate thinking of what the user might want to do. And actually more that's superseded by what the organization wants to do. So there's a great risk that a lot of the stuff that ends up on the website is effectively the website becomes a dumping ground. It's so easy to produce content without really understanding the tasks behind it. We're publishing things, whether it's on social media, everyone's got blogs and stuff. It's so easy these days to produce content that it's easy to just produce without actually taking some quality thinking about what is this content that we're creating, and is it really relevant for the end user? So it's much easier to add content than to remove it. In many organizations, just the thought of removing content sends shudders of fear. Like, no, we have the content, we must keep it up there. Every time you add content, you increase complexity. If you imagine your website is a haystack within which someone is trying to find their needle of information, their specific thing of information, we're constantly making that haystack a bit bigger. And you do need to think carefully, critically, and actually make some tough decisions about that. And I think there's a little quote here from gov.uk, which is sort of the super site for government services in the UK, which has really been very, very well and rightly so regarded for its user-centered design. And they do have a discipline about thinking about what content deserves to be on the site. And this is something I saw in a blog of theirs, and it's probably on, I could see this being on the wall somewhere in their building, in their organization. Every superfluous page we create is one more dead end for an angry, frustrated, and confused user. And I think those are very, very good words to live by as a mantra. In order to actually really provide a good experience, you do need to actually decide as an organization, we're going to believe in customer centricity. We're going to not just ask the people that are the front end web designers to be responsible for the customer experience. We're going to actually pervade this throughout the organization. So if you have that customer centricity mindset in the organization, you can provide a good customer experience which delivers business value, whether that business is commercial or government or other sectors. And that's achieved by not just wishful thinking and saying, well, let's just, let's have an internal view of what that good customer experience is. Let's do whatever possible to get some metrics about that as well. So that's why I've emphasized measuring that customer experience and making evidence-based decisions. So much of this is going to be coming back down to what is the evidence that we're moving in the right direction and providing a good customer experience. It's quite easy for lots of people to nod their heads and say, yes, customer experience is a great thing. Let's all do the customer experience. Let's put good user experience on our requirements tick list. But until you can actually start getting evidence and deciding what is that going to look like, and getting good collaboration around that and continuously improving. So what are top tasks? It's in the title of the talk today. Top tasks is really considering the key things that people want to do. If we think about, and here you can think about your own site, think about every site has a small set of tasks that deliver a huge amount of value. This is a relatively small number of tasks that most people coming to that site are there to do. So if you think of an airline site, most people are there to, let's say, booking a flight will be one of those top tasks. These are the top tasks, and they exist in something we can call the long neck in that image there. So that concept of the long neck, and especially the long tail, has been well recognized in the digital world. It's often applied to search engine terms and keywords and things like that, and lots of other aspects of digital out there. But also, every site has lots of tiny tasks, and these can also deliver a lot of value, but they can also destroy value by actually effectively getting in the way. And our goal in general for all this is to manage the top tasks and not to get too distracted by the wonderful content or the technology that can distract you from the focus on the top tasks. So we want, as a goal, to help the customers complete their top tasks as quickly and easily as possible. And going back to the GDS, which is gov.uk, essentially, just to borrow some of their own evidence as an example of that long neck and long tail. They've got lots of transactions, millions of people using that site every day, but they've only 4% of the tasks account for 90% of the transactions. So the bottom 76% of tasks account for only 1%. So there's a very long tail. There's a temptation to say, well, shouldn't everything, have, roughly equal exposure? No, definitely. We need to keep the focus tightly on those things that people are wanting to do. And this becomes even more challenging as the amount of content grows, which it inevitably has and is doing ever since they were launched back in 2013. This is from a few years ago, actually, and it's probably grown a little bit since then. This is the growing of that haystack within which someone might be trying to find their needle of information they're seeking. So it does take a lot of discipline as they went from 3,000 to 300,000 pages over a few years. If you don't manage the top tasks, your content effectively explodes and you can't really deliver any value. You need to go back and do some kind of a major redesign and try to get rid of some of the extraneous information that's often getting in the way and causing more distraction than benefit. So that's one organization that is trying to grapple with their top tasks. And the fact is, no one goes out and says, well, let's go create a really hard to navigate site. These things evolve over time. And again, you might find this is true if you think of your own site, that initially when it was launched, after quite a lot of care and attention during the design, everything seemed initially okay. But over time, things evolved in not a very good way. So you might have started off with a perfect site, but there's often demands to promote key topics. I've seen this in many of our clients where someone new comes in and they've got their own sort of pet project against which they have some personal KPIs perhaps, and they're demanding 25% of the homepage is relating to that. So that can actually skew things quite a bit in terms of content and functionality that gets displayed. There could be pressure to add more topics. Let's try to look more, world dominating or something like this, and adding more, maybe more tabs across the top. For the content that you have, perhaps we're really showing our mastery by just writing more and more screeds of information about the things that we're currently doing. And then there's the other thing, which I think is perhaps the most important thing, is that there's a real reluctance to remove old topics. There's this once something, it's like a one-way valve. Once something's put up on the site, it shall always be there. It must stay there because there might be one person every year that needs to try and find that page, and we don't want to deny them. So we'll see. There's often a price to be paid on that by keeping too much redundant, outdated, and trivial content. Imagine if we applied this to other aspects of our life, where we just keep adding things. Using a website in many ways, it's kind of like driving a car where you're having to make decisions. Do I want to be going left or right? Do I want to take that slip road to get off this route I'm going? What's the city I'm going to? What's the task I'm trying to do? It's often like driving on a motorway, and this is a scene I recall from the US. I used to see this kind of thing quite a bit. Where you know where you want to go, and they're giving you options about what kind of things you can be doing at that point in time. And these things, often, imagine if it evolved like this, instead of just being a simple slip road to go off there, they start saying, well, we have to tell you about this new fabulous new shopping mall here. And these people in this part of town want a nice big signposting towards there because that's a nice new development. It's getting a lot of attention. Oh, we have some more stores. Oh, here's another area. Here's a theme park. If you did this, it just gets to be too much, and people don't want all that distraction. If we apply that to the web situation, we could go from quick links to tools to FAQs and slow links and useless links and who knows what. And again, it ends up in effectively a digital car crash because there's just too much there being thrown to the user to try and make their decisions at a relatively quick pace that they want to go through as they're navigating the site. So you might be thinking, well, don't we already know if we're trying to find out, what people are wanting to do on the site? If that's the general theme, trying to build the site around what people are wanting to do. Can't we actually know that already? Don't we have enough information? We've got all sorts of tools out there. Probably not as effectively as you might think. You probably don't have as good a handle on what people are actually really wanting to do on your site as you might like to think. To a certain degree, some of the existing tools can give you clues, but I don't think any of them are effectively giving you what we'll see you get out of top tasks. So of course, there's things like Google Analytics. Now, that's not telling you what people have come to do. That's telling you the number of people, where they came from, their bounce rate, what time of day they came, which are the most popular pages. Now, that might give you a little bit of a clue, but that's not really telling you what they wanted to do. It told you where people actually went. You have various surveys. Some of them could be useful, but many of them are, I think, relatively useless. Like, how useful did you find this page? And, selecting from a series of smiley faces. Very few actually properly give a chance for the person to explain what I came here to do and did I succeed in it. Call centers and offline touch points can be quite useful as well, but there's often a bit of a gap between what they might be hearing, people calling up to say, hi, yes, thanks for taking my call. This is what I tried to do on your website, but I couldn't. If that conversation gets fed back, that's great, but very often it doesn't. There's even things that allow you to see little videos of people using your site, which is interesting, but you don't, unless you know what they're actually trying to do. It's not all that useful. These kind of session recording things. We have wonderful tools like usability testing, wonderful methods, I should say, like usability testing. We do this all the time, but that's getting a relatively small sample, and typically you are giving them the tasks that you're asking them to do. So it's a bit different than the vast amount of people that are actually going to the site at the moment and their range of things they might want to do. So it's that, although things like usability testing are wonderful, it's not really telling you what's the real situation of what people are doing or wanting to do on your site. So we have to start thinking about top task management is the best way to think of it. And there's really two phases. First is to actually answer that question. What is most important to your site visitors? What are the tasks that they want to do? And getting a good handle on that. And then using that information to improve your site. Based on that research, do some redesign of your site, what we're going to be calling the information architecture, essentially the navigation of the site, to see how well the customers can do those things that are most important to them. And there's lots of lessons to be learned on the way there. And the important thing is with the top task method, it's statistically reliable. So you can step aside from what typically happens in discussing the content, the aesthetics, the visuals of a site does typically devolve into a bit of opinions. Well, I don't really like the blue, and why do we always have to have the logo up there in the top left? Let's try something different. You can see all sorts of opinions going in. We're getting a lot of empirical evidence to drive things. So what's that evidence of is whether or not people can succeed in their tasks. And then we can actually start looking at the speed with which they can do it. Because if they can do those tasks more successfully and faster, that's going to be a better thing. And what are these tasks? These are their top tasks that we're measuring. So it's a management model for continuous improvement. So, I said, we don't want UX to be the domain of just well-versed and well-meaning opinions. It needs to be based on wherever possible quantitative evidence that can be measured so that you can have some continuous improvement going on. Okay, so what about these two phases? First one is to identify the top tasks. And this is essentially what the top tasks method is about. The top task ID is where it all starts, where we actually find out what are the tasks that people want to do. And this does take a bit of time, and it would require more time to properly explain it in some detail. But just as a top level, the way it works is that we list what are all the possible tasks that someone could do. We refine that into a short list of tasks that is then turned into a top of a survey that is shared with users where they can vote or select what they see as their top 5 tasks, their top 5 reasons for engaging with that organization. And then analyze that to identify what are the most important tasks, which are the ones that are most popular for people wanting to do. It's, in a nutshell, that's what it's about. Just to break it down a little bit more, you first look at what's the long list, what's the potential set of tasks that someone could want to do on your site or through the various touch points, digital and non-digital touch points. And you can look at the current website, take the views from internally, the customers as well, internal stakeholders. You can look at competitors. What are the tasks that people might be expecting to do on your site based on what they're doing through other sources as well? And you come up with what we're going to call a long list from which we need to refine that. And this is, I think, the key part of this. It's called the shortlisting process. We're sanitizing that long list, a lot of deduplications and rephrasing things into a short list of tasks. And with that shorter list is offered to the set of actual users of the site. And they go through a very quick, short survey process where they select their top 5 tasks that they'd expect to do on the site. And we try to do this with at least 400 people to build up the power of the statistical side. And then you can analyze the results. I'll show some examples of that. And that gives a prioritization of what these tasks are. And then from that, we can start to see some trends. What are the most important tasks? Compare that to the current navigation information architecture, make some decisions, and then get into some other means of trying to improve that information architecture, the design, and some tough decisions about what to do about the content for the site. So looking at these in a little bit more detail with that long listing, trying to cast that net very widely. What are all the tasks that one could possibly do on the site? There's going to be lots of different sources. You can look at things such as your searches. What are people typing into the search engines when they come to your site? You may have had previous other surveys. You can look at competitors as well, see what people are saying on social media. And this is really a way of trying to find out what are people wanting to do on the site. We're weighting that towards our listening ears towards the customer rather than the organizations, primarily, their view. And from that, we get a long list. But then from that, we need to shortlist that. We need to try to refine that down to a much more manageable, typically less than 100. That from that long list might be several hundred individual tasks that one could do if we're considering everything. So we need to often refine that down through this shortlisting sessions. And this is through a series of meetings, typically 4 to 6 or so listing sessions up to a couple hours long, where we're thrashing through what are the tasks, that people potentially wanting to do, and trying to rephrase them, deduplicate, and make sure we're actually controlling that. The phrasings of these tasks is quite important, and there's several things to be avoided in the rephrasing of these things. So we're looking out for repetition. We're trying to avoid jargon. We're not talking about formats. So things like social media is not a user's top task. That is just happens to be a format. Uh, you know, uh, Publications and PDFs is just a format. So there's a lot more to be said about how how the shortlisting aspect is done. I don't have time to go into at the moment, but the end result is that we end up with a shorter list, typically 50, 60, maybe 80 or so tasks, and those are then presented to the end users as a survey, as a list. Um, and the key things about this is that it's a list of potential tasks, and they're giving a sort of a priming question there. So this is one for the OECD, which is an acronym for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's a big international organization, collects a lot of information and develops reports comparing countries, etc. Um, and we ask people to look at the following list of shortlisted tasks, choose the top 5 reasons why they would come to the OECD. And there is a long list there. It doesn't look long there, but it carries on to the next page and the next page and even the next page. Now, the key thing about this is that that order could be important. If everyone got the same order of tasks, they might be more likely to select the ones near the top. But everyone gets a randomized set. So that's the way of countering that that long list of tasks, up to 70 in this point. And if everyone selects what they feel are their top 5 reasons to visit, to be engaging with the OECD, whether through a digital channel or otherwise, then that is giving some indication. It's giving a lot of repeated, in a way, votes for what people see as the key things that they're there to do. Whether that is, finding out hotels near the OECD locations, you could probably guess that's probably not going to be a top one, but it is a task that could be done. Or it could be links to other sources of statistics. It could be lots of other things as well. And the results, when they come out, are prioritized from the most important, or that one that got the most votes towards the key task, all the way down to the small ones. And we typically will split these into 4 quadrants. And the coloring of these is useful, as you'll see in some of the following slides. The pattern for results is typically along this line. That's what does that add up to? It looks almost like 100 there. These numbers won't be the same, but roughly the proportions are along these lines, where you have typically 25% of those votes. That's why I mean that top quadrant, assigned to about 5 tasks. And then we have some medium tasks, and then the small ones, and then the tiny ones. And remember what I said earlier, we want to emphasize the top tasks more than the tiny tasks. And for the OECD, these were the results for that. There were actually just 4 tasks, took up just about 25%. These are the 4 tasks. Finding information about country surveys, reviews, and reports was clearly the number 1 tasks. And you can see those top 4 tasks. And there's some other interesting points. That top task itself, that number 1 there, that got as many votes for it. Number of people that said, yeah, that's one of my tasks, one of my 5 tasks, is that one. That one got as many votes as the bottom 28 combined. So that's an interesting top level view. That's useful, and that on its own might be give enough initiative to make some changes to the site. But there's a lot more that can be done, because we can ask the users not just what they came to do, but a little bit about them, some of their demographics, what kind of users they are. And that's where I think it can get especially useful. So in a different study, we had 3 different types of users there. This is looking at a business information site, and people had to self-classify whether or not they were a self-employed business owner, whether they were employed, or they were starting a business. Okay, 3 different, or what the employed means, they were employing people in that. And they found that the categories of questions can reveal differences. We've found that there's 5 top tasks, those yellow ones there. But those varied depending on the kind of user you are and what stage of running the business you are. So if you were starting a business it's a different set of needs than if you are um, running the business. So, for instance, when you're starting the business, the idea of managing people was not typically a top priority at that stage. Um, there's other priorities, for at that stage of their business. So, for instance, things such as forming a company and learning about that was one of their top tasks. So that interplay of the type of user and what their tasks are is very often important, and that might be something you can reflect in the content design. Sometimes it could be even age differences. This is from a study that was done looking at um, the health department in Ireland. They found that checking symptoms, for instance, was much more relevant and important as a top task for younger people than older people. Um, and that is typical, because typically when you get older, if you know what the symptoms are, you probably know what it is. You've already found out what that is. You know what your condition is, and that's a common trend. Is that checking of symptoms is going to be much more relevant and popular amongst amongst young people. Interestingly, so is interest in mental well-being amongst younger people more so than older people, and this can be applied not just through the website design but other channels as well. So the other interesting thing that you can do at this stage is get the internal view, because we've done this survey with the end users. That doesn't mean you can't do it with the internal team as well, and find out essentially what do you think the top tasks of our customers are, and actually do a bit of a gap analysis. So you get your internal stakeholders, and you can find out sort of this, we can call it an empathy between sort of what the participants in the organization think the top tasks are, and what the actual end users think their top tasks are. And that sometimes shows some interesting um, revelations there. So, for instance, in this one here, this is looking at this is the OECD once again. Um, Statistics on a particular topic, and on that one, the overview, what the organization does, there was a much more an alignment, or a lack of alignment, between what the organization felt that there's a lot more people would be interested in an overview of what the organization does than the actual end users, and that's why that sort of empathy, that ratio between the two, is flagged red there. So that can show really where some alignment between the organization and the end users is actually needed. So what do you do with all this? You've learned a lot about what the tasks are people wanting to do. You can look through that as a prism to look at your own content and functionality and say, right, that's what people want to do. How well does that marry up to what we're actually offering them? And if you go into that in a lot more detail, you get into essentially the world of information architecture. And this is a well-versed area of user experience. There's a whole subsection to do with navigation design. And there's methods out there such as card sorting and tree testing that have been well documented, and they're very useful. And they come into play here, because once we have established what the top tasks are, we have a good handle on what the sort of the top, the top 15, 20 or so tasks are. Then we can ask people to organize those in a way that we can use that information to design the navigation of the website or app or whatever it is you're creating. So you can conduct tree testing, which is kind of doing the same thing in reverse, where we have presented someone a set of navigation options, and we actually see where they actually go on the site, and how well these navigation options serve as stepping stones, effectively, to get to where they want to go. Um, and you can start to make some decisions then about really what is the best way to organize it, and essentially also if there's content that could be removed. That top task ID may have identified a lot of content that is to do with a very tiny task. And when that happens, there's typically some good discussions to be had, but they're at least evidence-based discussions about why do we have so much content on this one topic that is actually very much a tiny task that people want. Very few people are really wanting to do that, and you can have a much more focused and productive conversation about that. So you can get into this cycle of continuous improvement, having identified the top tasks, and you start to measure them on a continuous basis using a method that we call the task performance indicator, to measure on a recurring basis How well are people doing? What's their success rate? Right, this is one of our top tasks. Let's watch closely as someone's doing that as a form of usability testing. It's a slightly different way than traditional usability testing, but we're really focusing in on seeing almost forensically where are they going right, where are they going wrong, how much time are they taking to perform these tasks, what are the barriers that they're running into, and then thinking after doing a set of that, right, what needs to be done if several people are running into these barriers and we're starting to see the trends here. Let's make a change and retest it and see if we're going in the right direction. And that's what I mean by this continuous improvement that is going on. Because by doing this on a regular basis, it could be every 3 months, 6 months, maybe once a year at most, we can start to see where the effect is of the change or what the effect is of changes. So let's just look at one particular, let's say the task was finding a job in another European country. This is for some work for the EU. Um, um, Many people were looking in the wrong place. The success rate was only 53% when they were presented with a navigation that looked like that. It's well, not the navigation itself didn't look like that, but the options were there in that list. And the correct place where they should have gone, if there is to be looking in work, live, travel in the EU. But many people were seeing this link title called jobs and saying, well, that's it. That's where I'm going to go. Now, that's not correct. And maybe they corrected themselves later on, but that's a mistake that was pretty easily changed once we know the problem. And this is the issue. A lot of times people don't know this problem exists unless you have a close look, such as this. They said, right, there's a problem with the jobs section there. Let's change the label. As simple a thing as that. We don't need a fancy redesign. We're going to call that jobs at the European Commission because that's really what that's was talking about. Well, then that's reduced. It hasn't totally eliminated, but it has greatly reduced the number of people that are looking in the wrong place. And if you think of your own navigation using sites, it's almost like looking in different doors. You know, is this where it is? No, it's not. And we're actually attracting fewer people to look in the wrong door. So the success rate went up. And this happens for loads of different tasks on this site, on lots of other sites when you take a close look at it through this task performance indicator method. So all this can affect the organization as well as the interface. One of the, I think, challenges with user experience in general is that it's very easy to get down to the minutiae of the layout of the page and all the surface level stuff and, oh, what color should we make that button and maybe should I put this over here? I think the greatest success happens when you can think in the bigger picture. What could this mean for the organization? What are the knock-on effects if people fail to actually perform these tasks that they're wanting to do? What could this mean for the organization? Its reputation, maybe its impact, knock-on impact to other channels when people can't achieve this online. Maybe they'll be calling the call center more. So if we increase the success on whatever the task is, what could that mean? Could it be reducing support tasks, increasing sales, increasing customer satisfaction? That's a hard thing sometimes to get a clear metric on, but you can have that conversation about that and maybe increase your channel shift. So in general, the more you can raise that conversation beyond just, oh, it's an interface level thing. Let's get the front end developers to sort it out. That's good. What does this mean for the organization itself? And that's where the real, I think, impactful conversations can have, where we're raising user experiences is not just the interface design issue, but it has real business impact, and that's the way that I think top tasks can be best applied. Now, it needs to be done on a regular basis. You can rerun that top tasks method from time to time and see if your top tasks may have changed. So, for instance, in the past year, while we've all been getting through the pandemic, lots of people's top tasks have changed quite a bit in lots of different industries. People aren't talking about traveling so much. They're doing a lot more things with, home improvement and things. There's lots in different industries. The impact of the pandemic on what people are wanting to do and expecting to do online has been tremendous. There's also ways that you can keep tabs on what people are wanting to do over time. This is a related method. We call it true intent. And just to briefly introduce this, because I see it as a partner with top tasks. What that does is give you, through people that are coming to your site, just finding out what are you here to do, and then finding out whether or not they succeeded or not, what they might be considering otherwise, and a bit about them. So very much the intentions are similar to top tasks. You can keep a tab on that, and you can start to identify what are the key things that people are wanting to do and where are they not succeeding. That might be a place where you're putting your attention, wanting to put your attention. So you can have a listing of the tasks that, with the most popular ones rated at the top there. And then for each one, what the success rate is. That top task there seems to be having a relatively high success rate. That's great. But that third one down of changing your plan, this is on a telecoms company, is still getting a 9.2% demand out of the people visiting the site, but a really quite a low success rate. That could be perhaps a good place to start putting the attention and taking a deeper dive, maybe through usability testing, to find out what's going on there. So that pretty much is my introduction to what top tasks are. I'll give you a couple of examples in just a minute. The main benefits are that it gives a better customer experience. It lets people do the important things better, easier, more quickly. It really helps you to manage your content better. It's producing less redundant content, and the content that is created is actually relevant, should be made relevant to the actual top tasks of the user. Um, it does work better for some sites than others. I think big organizational, international organizational, or even within a country, government sites, education sites often quite it lends itself towards the top tasks approach, typically better than things like an e-commerce site, for instance. Um, but just to give you an example from a government site, and this is from a Liverpool City Council. This is an old image of its homepage beforehand, where it suffers from what we can call fragmented navigation, where there is navigation options here. They're trying to do some shouty navigation, sorry, with different colors in different areas, benefits advice, do it online. There's lots of different things that are kind of there's no clear direction as to what they want to do. And a lot of that content is there because the people behind the content within the council were saying, I think this is important. Let's put that up there. Ah, yes, people need to know about this. They need to know about that. And that happens in many organizations. They did a top tasks approach where they found that there was a pretty clear idea of what some of these key tasks are. This always comes through. They discovered and redesigned for the top tasks. And very importantly, they reduced the number of pages on the site, quite dramatically removing thousands of pages from 4,000 down to 700 pages. Now that might be shocking, to some people that, why would you ever want to remove content? Well, it did them the power of good to remove that, because with the removed content, there's less of a haystack to get through. They're able to implement a new site architecture, much better one, much more user-focused one. And they revised the content on the key pages to get straight to the point. And the outcome was a great success. This is the newer design, or the resulting design, much a simpler design, not just visually, but it's geared towards what people are wanting to do. It was playing back the words that people are wanting to do. It reduced the support call volumes tremendously, which is the knock-on effect that is very important. And a great increase in the number of people reporting things online and doing things online. That leads to cost reductions over time. So just to wrap up, what about our good old friends there at the IRS? Whatever happened with that website with all the smiling faces for paying your taxes? Are we going to stick with that? No. They did a top tasks approach because they knew that a change had to happen. This was, again, a very fragmented navigation, not particularly user-oriented. And this is the current site. Literally just got this screenshot yesterday. And this, ever since making this change, it has looked more or less like this. The content, the key content has changed a little bit. So we've got some stuff about coronavirus tax relief there. But this is a vast improvement. It strips away the happy people. So we don't see the happy faces, but I can be absolutely confident that there's a lot more happy people as a result of doing this, because they've listed on there what are the key tasks that people are likely to want to do. They know that based on real evidence from this. And there's been a tremendous success, higher conversion rate success of people finding and doing the things that they want, and consequently fewer people having to call the call center for that level of support. So that kind of idea of removing content, making brave decisions about your navigation and information architecture is really what the whole world of top tasks is about. And just to wrap up, where you can learn more is, as I did mention beginning, Jerry McGovern is kind of can be seen as he's the founder of the method. So he's continuously writing about this. He's got a great blog called New Thinking. And just looking back on some of the past publications about that, he's got a great book about the how-to guide of top tasks. A few other publications as well that relate to this world of trying to uh, deeply investigate your user's true need so that you can have a constant critical look at the content and functionality on your site, which is really the essence of what Top Tasks is about. Feel free to drop me a line either through email or Twitter and things like this. Find me on LinkedIn, whatever. I'd be glad to talk more about this, go into a little bit more detail, for instance, on the method itself, which I know I had to very briefly go through today. But look forward to hearing any more. And at the moment, I think we're going to have a chance for perhaps a few questions just to round out the hour that we have here. So I think at this point, I'm supposed to seamlessly hand back to you, Debbie.
It's all working perfectly. Thank you so much for that, Chris. A very compelling presentation about why evidence-based top tasks can make a real difference and have such a positive impact, as you say, as much as a smiley people images, but people who are happy. Wow. So a couple of questions for you. Do companies need to revisit the top tasks in case they change over time? Do people repeat the exercise?
Yes, yeah, and they do change over time. As just generally the impact of digital mobile when mobile started to really pervade our life and we're doing more tasks on there, that has a big impact on it. But I definitely see things like the coronavirus really has changed people's behavior and their expectations of what they want to be doing online. So it is a good idea. I'd say at least once a year, try to repeat the exercise, to actually just get it, because each time is kind of a spot check in the moment based on what people are wanting to do, and it is a good thing. I'd say to do that about once a year.
Wonderful. If the recommendation is that you need to remove content, brave decision, is there ever resistance to that, and how do you overcome it?
Yes, there is. I think this sense, and I think this is changing this idea that, well, once I've published something, it's almost set in stone, even though it's the complete opposite. It's digital. It can be easily deleted in a minute. But yeah, there is this kind of I think a lot of people's nose gets out of joint when you tell them that, look, we're having to remove this content. And I've been part of these conversations. Are you kidding me? Bill spent 3 days writing that article, and you can actually remove that, really? And Bill might be a little bit offended, or maybe his manager or something like this. It can cause some bruised egos, etc. But this is where you need to guide the conversation more towards, well, what the organization wants is successful users on the website, and what that success means is people getting more quickly and easily to what they want. So we're sort of dialing down or even removing some of the content that exists there. And yeah, it is a difficult difficult conversation sometimes to have, but with the right level of maturity in the organization, it shouldn't be too difficult. To set that expectation that your content will not be up there necessarily forever. We have to keep up with the moment and what users are actually wanting.
When people are defining top tasks, identifying them, how can that feed into perhaps your SEO strategy?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think one of the reasons why people often feel that content should be up there and permanent is that they think, well, the more words, the more stuff we have up there, that's bound to be better. I would counter that the more relevant stuff that you have up there, it's bound to be better. And the less, I'm not an SEO expert, but the less sort of distraction and noise you have, as a percentage, let's say, of the content that you have, that's bound to be better. So with top tasks, once you know what the key tasks are and how they're phrased, and it doesn't have to be the only means to actually get a handle on how people call their top tasks, But once you know what these are, then you can actually change your content, change some of the phrasing of the words, so that these, whether you call them keywords or not, so that they're actually more relevant and they'll resonate with those end users. So they're more likely to be showing up, higher up on the search engines. So even though removing content might sound anathema to people in the world of SEO, I think we have to consider that quality quantity discussion, and a less amount but of higher quality content is bound to be better, actually.
Makes lots of sense. Final question, as we really are kind of a little bit up against the clock now. What's the best ways to get people to complete a survey?
Yeah, I didn't talk about the way the survey's deployed, and of course it will be very much a subset. We're talking maybe 5% of people that visit the site might be completing the survey. I wouldn't say to incentivize them with this. Typically with top tasks, the way there's two main ways. It could be something that's a pop-up on the site itself, and asking them to do that, to be trying to help the organization by just letting them know that it's a very quick. I mean, this is, even though you're looking at 70 items there and you think, oh gosh, that must be really difficult. It takes like a minute to do it, because people just quickly scan up and down and say, yeah, here, there, boom, boom. And within just a minute or two, they've picked their top task. So let them know that it's a quick survey. It'll only take a couple of minutes. It'll be greatly valuable, and then and they can carry on to do what they want to do. So that's more like the pop-up types. The other way is through emailing it. So being proactive, and asking them, as we, in a way, as we know that you're a regular user of site X, let's say, of this organization, what are the top 5 reasons here? And you can present the exact same survey. I'd shy away from incentivizing them, because once you start to introduce an incentive, you start to likely changing the audience. The word gets out that, hey, well, look at this, I get a £10 Amazon voucher for doing this survey. Oh, great, I'll do it. I've never been to that site before, but I'll fill out their survey. Sure, great. Hey, so you're likely to get a lot more noise and inaccurate people. So yeah, that's the best way to do it. Let them know that it's a very short, essentially it's typically 2 or 3 questions. The main one being, pick the top 5 reasons why you engage with this organization.
That's wonderful. Chris, as always, so helpful, useful. I'd really recommend anybody who's thinking about, redeveloping a website to listen to this and to take note of some of the things that you've highlighted. Thank you. Chris Rourke from User Vision, always totally engaging and lots of useful information. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in today, and we will actually share the recording of the session, so you'll be able to share and show other people this content. And just to say that we're continuing with the program, the A4Q Congress, and we'll also have the people in the A4Q Congress Hall. Chris, if you've got some time, I can't pop in there right now, but if you pop into the Congress Hall, and the team can say Chris is here if anybody wants to ask any additional questions. So
okay, I'll do that now.
Once again, a huge thank you to you, Chris, and take good care, everyone. Cheerio.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye. Thanks, Debbie. Bye.